could take the current income, and my accountant and attorneys are screaming as I talk. It sounds like legal and tax advice. It's legal tax education, okay? Just have to make that disclaimer. But you could literally take $1,000, put in an offshore trust. It costs you $300, no more than $600. Now, you can come back to America in the form of that trust if you create one job. The Washington bureaucrats are willing to pay you $50,000. I just had this conversation with the people at the New York Development Corporation. They were laughing because if Americans knew this stuff, you could turn around the engine of America. See, I'm not into the whole speech-making thing about this. My thing is make the money and then just do the good. But you got to make the money in a way that you don't cripple other people. So to your point, they are never going to rise. Bolivia is an anomaly. That's why I try to get people to understand. If you've never been to Bolivia, when you land in Bolivia, you feel the Bolivian energy. But they also showed slums in Caracas. I've been there. There's no revolution there. And they're right. They're only, America's interests, military-wise, is only where our interests are economically. That's why they are interested in the Sudan. Back in the mid-90s, there was all this talk about slavery in the Sudan. Yes, I saw it. It does exist. But that's not why they put that on blast. They put it because the rulers of the Sudan who control the oil, which are religious and happen to be Muslim, refuse to do business with the World Bank. If you don't do business with the World Bank, they label you a rogue nation. The only reason why Muammar Gaddafi was killed, and that's an assassination. Most of you have no experience with the military, but anybody who's just paying a little bit of attention, those were all, if you just look back to JFK, who was the beloved president of the United States for the most part. He got shot in the head in Texas, in Houston. Now you should ask yourself a simple question. If Muammar Gaddafi was hated by so many of his people, do you realize that he didn't have a bulletproof limo, and he rode on top of it for 25 years. Now, I'm not saying the gentleman was some angel. I don't know him personally. But I will say this. No one who's threatened or feels afraid for their life and has so many people hating them is going to ride unprotected. In fact, his military guard were women. Right. I'm trying to, it gets a little nefarious, but here's what Muammar Gaddafi was doing. Here's some facts for you. In Guyana, where my wife is from, he was self-financing, because he has one of the largest gold reserves of all of these countries. He was self-financing the redistribution of wealth in Guyana and a lot of countries. He was trying to convince them to step outside the prowess of the central banking system, which is a debt for legal tender system. He was trying to convince number one, the OPEC nations to get off the petrodollar, which is a U.S. dollar-based foreign wealth. They print U.S. in $100 denominations. In fact, the United States Department of Treasury and the Secret Service's first job is not protection of the president. It's fraud. That's where they were started. And each country, Japan has a plate that prints $100 bills. All the countries that hold our debt, the Department of Treasury issues them a plate to print money for use in their culture. So when you talk about rising up, they made another great point about tariffs. Anybody who's into economics understands what tariffs are. But the reality is, China and a lot of Southeastern Asian countries are using that, and then once they're able to build up their reserves, they can turn back to America. But do you know why they're able to pull this off? Because what they know, they don't teach us. It's kind of like Christopher Columbus discovered America. We all know he didn't, then why do you keep teaching it? You know, because it points to another fact. So I always tell folks, if they let people understand that America's, this is what they teach overseas. When I was in London, they teach you, America's broke. That's what they teach in economics over there. We have nothing. In fact, since 1933, Americans haven't had access to gold. It was illegal to have gold in 1933. They took it from the American people. So what they understand is, just make enough money and America does whatever you want. So there is no wars like you think war. Like I know I watched 24 with Jack Bauer, and there's this threat. The only threat is the United States. I'm being honest with you. But it's because of the mass ignorance of the people. I forget who said this. It was Louis Farrakhan. He said this: "You get for a leader what you are as the people. As a people, if you are an ignorant people, you cannot have a smart leader.
Yep.
And vice versa. If you are a smart people, you cannot have an ignorant leader. You will drive him or her out of leadership. What they do is they dumb us down. We are now 26th in literacy. We are behind countries that don't have running water. We're behind countries that have shanties for bathrooms. This kind of madness is what just drives it. But that whole concept of rise up is not going to happen. We have to rise up and use our capital more correctly. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
It was very interesting because I was listening to what you were basically saying. You were mentioning The Matrix, which is clearly a film about enlightenment. And I've actually been doing some research on this recently, especially on Stanley Kubrick, and all his films talk about the dangers of the elite, and basically his last film, Eyes Wide Shut, really is a film about enlightenment and about the hidden veil that's before our eyes. But I think the most interesting, I could talk about this forever, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to get to my main question, which is this. I recently saw, not too long ago again, Lord of War, the Nicolas Cage film about arms being sold in Africa and all around the world. And I thought that film was, one of the greatest films of enlightenment I think I've ever seen, because what it made me understand was the reason America will arm dictators with guns, keep the people, the poverty controlled, is because they understand that Africa is a continent of resource and richness, and then they know that it could become a first world country or continent, but they repress all this because they don't want it to develop. And now China have understood this. They started coming into Africa, doing the same as the West and Europe. And, that was a huge blow to me. But, after watching this documentary, and I've been doing a lot of research on the internet, and this is what my question boils down to is, the internet is trying to spread this information now. And now I'm hearing about what's happening in Iran, in China. They're blocking information spreading, and they're saying more and more that this is going to happen. They're going to stop this kind of information spreading on the internet because they know people can get access to this information. I mean, what are your views on this? And
do you want to go ahead?
The military invented the internet. That's the first thing I understand. The second, Al Gore, Vice President Al Gore popularized it, with the World Wide Web kind of thing. But you got to understand something. The internet's not fact; it's reference. So when something is referenced on the internet, it's statements that are taking place. The reality is there is no possible way to stop that other than to shut down the internet, which would be a complete violation of the First Amendment. And that was actually what the Tea Party originally got created as. It's turned into this hick, kill Obama kind of thing, But that's not what they started. They were after the Federalist concepts upon which the Constitution and the states were formulated. But the internet can't be shut down at this point. There's too many entry points to it. Plus, there is also the other movement of it's a free information, free data sharing concept where corporations should pay. Openware, thank you. In fact, OpenCourseWare is going to be the end. I took strategy at Harvard Business School, and I forget what's the doctor's name in my class with strategy. He said that OpenCourseWare would end the elite control of education, because education in and of itself, it's well, there's a lot of arguments out there. But if you could have access to information and then make up your own mind, that's a revolution. So I'll just leave it on that. That's the part.
Yeah. Now, I would definitely add on that, because ultimately what it's boiling down to is various forms of social control and the flip side, complacency. Because in this country, what is the really irony part is that most people don't realize that they're perfect beneficiaries. This is a country that's set up by the elites, for the elites, with an explicit mandate to kind of every now and then trickle stuff down to keep the rest at bay. All right? It's a concept that worked for 200 years. It's the most ingenious political concept ever invented, because it works. Because it has a lure that infiltrates political thinking in other places and makes, indeed, neoliberalism a religion. All right? We make it a religion, then it becomes the norm. If it becomes the norm, everybody adheres to it and accepts it blindly.
Yep.
In America, more so than in other countries. I'm not saying, for instance, that the Europeans, and I oftentimes in my courses come back to particular Scandinavian countries, because they have found a decent balance for their own populations. At the same time, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland, and Norway are as complacent in the global economy of repressing the South and making their own wealth and welfare systems possible through the expression. However, at least it has led to more educated people, greater amounts of charity, greater education, more awareness, more green policies, a little bit more progressiveness, disinvesting into their military, because they all are invested in that also, of course. Death sells, all right? And so what it takes, ultimately, is more awareness of our all complicity in this. That's an educational task. The internet certainly will help liberalize that, because it's not the same stranglehold as 5 media corporations controlling all other media. So the internet is not yet as controlled, can give us the possibilities of using digital technology for liberation. We've seen that in the Velvet Revolutions that we've seen in the Arab Spring and elsewhere. So there is possibility in that. But at the same time, also mind the great social control that comes with it. And trust me, our elites, which I'm part of, are very clear, or are very smart and strategic about new media, and then using that too to drive their message, and not the message of the grassroots, the progressives, and others. So we already seen that in some ways, as certain media outlets, even on the internet, begin to dominate and basically drive back home the neoliberal message and this blind faith in growth.
Wow, I could tell this conversation could go on for a